Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Junior English. We now turn in your hymnals to 1364, 1365, and Judith Ortiz Cofer's the Latin Deli and Ars Poetica. Let's start first of all with dates and information of biography on 1365. Notice she was born in 1952. The first heading is Nomadic Youth. Judith Ortiz Cofer was born in Puerto Rico to young parents. To provide for his family, the father gave up his dream of a college education and joined first the United States Army and then the Navy. When he was assigned to the Brooklyn Navy Yard in 1955, the Ortiz family moved to Paterson, New Jersey. Ortiz Cofer's father spent long stretches of time in Europe. During his absences, her mother would pack up the family and return to Puerto Rico. The constant shuffling made Ortiz Cofer feel like a permanent new girl, quote unquote. When in the United States, she attended public school, spoke English, and behaved according to the strict social customs of the American Northeast. When in Puerto Rico, she attended a Catholic school and was immersed in a relaxed and colorful Latino culture. This geographically divided life left Ortiz Cofer with a sense of homelessness that would eventually fuel her creativity as a writer. Next heading, Putting Down Roots. After graduating from Augusta College in 1974, Ortiz Cofer moved to Florida with her husband Charles Cofer, whom she had married in 1971. She spent the next 10 years teaching, earning a master's degree, and discovering poetry. Within several years, she had published 3 small books of poetry. In 1984, Ortiz Cofer and her family moved to Georgia, where she continues to live, teach, and write. She is the author of several volumes of poetry, a memoir, a short story collection, and a collection of essays. She also has published 2 novels. The second of these, The Light of the Sun, was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in 1989. Though she writes in all genres, Ortiz Cofer holds poetry especially dear. She says, "It taught me how to write. Poetry contains the essence of language. Every word weighs a ton," end quote. I also like this quote on 1365. "I speak English with a Spanish accent and Spanish with an American accent. I am a composite of 2 worlds." We'll see this in the poem we're about to study, the Latin Deli. Before we get there, though, let's jump over to 2B and to page 1364 in literary analysis information. And let's definitely write down this word, imagery. Descriptive language that uses images, word pictures, combinations of words that appeal to the senses and create pictures in the reader's mind. Images draw readers into the literary work by recreating the sensations of the actual experience. Images invite the reader into the world of the poem, to walk down the narrow aisle, to scan the shelves of packages, to murmur the names on the labels. They are the tools by which the poet builds meaning and emotion. Of course, as you read, you want to notice how these images accumulate to paint a portrait of a place, a group of people, and ultimately convey the poem's central message. Under reading strategy, we want to analyze sensory details. We want to first picture in our mind each separate detail, and then second, consider the details as a group. And you have a chart there that you can use, obviously, that will help you. Your vocabulary, 3 words there at the bottom of 1364 are significant as well. Let's go ahead now and turn to 1366 and an Ars Poetica and the background information. Beginning in the mid-1900s, a stream of immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries of Latin America and the Caribbean have sought sanctuary of various kinds in the United States. Some flee economic hardship or deprivation, others political oppression. Still others seek a better education or job training. This Ars Poetica, or a poem about the art of poetry, and we've already seen this, haven't we, with this Ars Poetica from earlier studies, right, in our own textbook, combines the circumstances of these immigrants with the idea of poetry itself serving as a kind of home. Right. By the way, you can go back to page 1368 for the comments, or you can go forward to page 1368 for comments on the Ars Poetica. All right, so let's now turn. In this poem, Cofer's going to paint a vivid word picture of a food store. I would write that down really quickly at level 1. Of a food store in a Latino neighborhood in the United States, while recalling the sights, smells, tastes associated with the store. And by the way, write this down really quickly at level 2B. Notice the ways in which all of the major senses, what you can see, what you can taste, what you can smell, etc., are referenced. She creates portraits of the people who shop there. People who come there as much to hear Spanish spoken as to purchase items. It is a significant thing we'll ask at 3B. When you are in a foreign country as an American student, one of the things that gives you a sense of comfort is when you get to go into a grocery store where you know the majority of the people there will speak your language. How do you imagine it feels then for people who are immigrants or visitors to our country who then long to hear their language spoken here? Let's go ahead and study the poem now, and then we'll come back to work at level 1 and of course 2 and 3.
The Latin Deli, an Ars Poetica, by Judith Ortiz Cofer. Presiding over a Formica counter, plastic mother and child magnetized to the top of an ancient register, the heady mix of smells from the open bins of dried codfish, the green plantains hanging in stalks like votive offerings. She is the patroness of exiles, a woman of no age who was never pretty, who spends her days selling canned memories while listening to the Puerto Ricans complain that it would be cheaper to fly to San Juan than to buy a pound of Bustelo coffee here, and to Cubans perfecting their speech of a glorious return to Havana, where no one has been allowed to die and nothing to change until then. Pa to Mexicans who pass through, talking lyrically of dólares to be made in El Norte, all wanting the comfort of spoken Spanish, to gaze upon the family portrait of her plain white face, her ample bosom resting on her plump arms, her look of maternal interest as they speak to her and each other of their dreams and their disillusions. How she smiles understanding when they walk down the narrow aisles of her store, reading the labels of packages aloud, as if they were the names of lost lovers, suspiros, merengues, the stale candy of everyone's childhood. She spends her days slicing jamón y queso and wrapping it in wax paper tied with string, plain ham and cheese that would cost less at the A&P, but it would not satisfy the hunger of the fragile old man lost in the folds of his winter coat, who brings her lists of items that he reads to her like poetry, or the others whose needs she must divine, conjuring up products from places that now exist only in their hearts. Closed ports she must trade with.
Let's now turn to this poem as a celebration of language. And as we go there, just turn the page to 1368. And this notion of the Ars Poetica, this of course is used in the title, so let's take some quick notes here. I'm just reading with you on 1368. The term Ars Poetica comes from Latin and means the art of poetry. Today, the phrase describes a statement about what poetry should be. The earliest and most famous Ars Poetica was Poetics, written by the Greek philosopher Aristotle in 335 BC. Aristotle laid out his ideas about what makes good art, and especially good literature. Writing a century after Sophocles and Euripides had composed their famous tragedies, Aristotle analyzed their plays to divine the rules of great drama. He argued art should be an imitation of reality, and he judged the quality of art on the basis of that idea. 3 centuries after Aristotle, the Roman poet Horace wrote his own statement on literature, written in verse. His Ars Poetica stressed the importance of harmony and balance in art. Horace said that the job of a writer is to delight and instruct at the same time. Of course, obviously the question will be, why does Judith Ortiz Cofer use this term, an Ars Poetica, to talk about a Latin deli? Okay, so we're going to want to answer that question, but let's start at level 1. What is this poem about? Can you just jot down in your notes what you think this poem is about? Many students have said it's really about 2 things. 1, it's about a description of a woman who works at a Latin deli in an American city, selling all kinds of food products. You know, everything from fruit and vegetables to, sandwiches. But the second part of the poem has to do with why she has customers. They don't just come to the deli to buy food, do they? Jot down at level 1, why do they come to the deli? Go ahead and write it down really quickly. Why do they come to the deli? What is it that brings them again and again to the deli? And of course the answer is language. They live in a country where they don't get to hear and speak Spanish all the time. So they need to come to a place where they can hear and speak the language they love. Why? Because language, of course, references lives. Not just one life, but lots of lives. And memories. And the ways in which language is wrapped up, can we say it that way, in the life of people. And so they come to a place where they can feel safe to speak and to be spoken to in the language they love, because memories are tied to all of that. All right, let's jump really quickly to 2A and talk for a few moments about major messages and themes. How about this? Let's list a few. How about this one for first one? You are your language, or language is. The language that you were raised with speaking, or the languages that you were raised with speaking, defines who you are. In many ways, language is kind of like a time machine, which can take you back to earlier times in your life, to early memories in your life. Number 2, let's point out, language can divide us. Of course, there are huge debates, as we know, in America about what should be considered the national language. Many people argue the national language is English, and everyone should learn and speak English. Of course, the counter to that argument is, when you study the history of America, Americans were, of course, lots and lots of immigrants coming from lots and lots of places that spoke lots of different languages. And America has always been a melting pot of peoples and of languages. And therefore, as America becomes more diversified, maybe we should think less about a single language representing us and more about multiple languages representing us. Of course, this poem suggests that language can often be the place where we not only receive comfort, but also we can receive a bit of concern. Maybe we feel somehow dislocated. Finally, another major message here is that we're always looking for some safe place where we can be ourselves, where we can share who we truly are. And this Latin Deli, of course, is the place where lots and lots of people come to share who they are. They all want, as it says at line 17, 18, they all want the comfort of spoken Spanish, the comfort of the language that they identify as being home for them. Of course, let's jump to 2B really quickly and ask, why is this an Ars Poetica? What is it that is so compelling about the statement about what makes great art, great poetry? One argument could be that language is poetry, because it is the lifeblood of our spoken existence. Without that language, without the ability to share that language, we somehow are lesser people. We're not as rich, we're not as full. And that's what great art does. It allows us to communicate, first with ourselves and then with each other. And as we communicate with each other, we have to have a common language. That common language is not Spanish or English. That common language is art. In this case, poetry. And the shared experiences that poetry provides. All right, let's jump to 3A really quickly. What is, for you, your favorite text that celebrates language, celebrates words, celebrates the importance of language in your life? Do you have a movie that really does speak to the power of the way language can be a place of comfort, a homecoming of a kind? And then finally at 3B, we'll ask this question. What are your thoughts about language? What are your thoughts about feeling at home in language? Do you speak a second language? Did you grow up around other languages? What are your thoughts about growing up around other languages? Where do you come down on this issue about what language should be the national language of America? What are your feelings about learning a second language in school, for example, even though you don't technically have to use the language to speak to survive? Do you think it's important? Do you think all American children, for example, should grow up learning both English and Spanish? Do you think that would make sense in our culture? And why? One way or the other? Where do you come down on that? Finally, of course, we can ask the most personal of questions. When have you felt the most foreign in your life? When have you felt the most out of place? And now question, did that experience have anything to do with language? Was there language involved in it at all? It's fascinating how many of my students will say, you know, that's really weird you would ask me that, because the last time I felt really, really foreign was when I, for example, was with a bunch of upperclassmen and I was an underclassman, and they did start using language in ways I didn't completely understand or appreciate. I felt somehow like an outsider. Well, there you go, the great poem of Judith Ortiz Cofer. I hope it made you think. Thank you.